Talent mistakes that cost CIOs millions, the new AI standards group and who's left out of that AI standards group, and what you need to know about working with Big Four consultants. That's what we're going to talk about here in episode 253 of Transformation Ground Control.
Welcome to Transformation Ground Control. Ground Control. The podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. This podcast features technology agnostic and international discussions related to digital strategy, software selection, implementation, change management, business process optimization, and everything else you need to know to make your digital transformation project successful. Whether you're embarking on an ERP implementation, supply chain transformation, or any other business or digital transformation, this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Ground control is a major time.
Hello, welcome to Transformation Ground Control, the tech agnostic podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation, including strategy, people, process, and technology. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage. We're an independent and tech agnostic consulting provider that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. And joining me, as always, is our co-host, Darian Chwialkowski. Darian, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited for today.
Yes, great show. We're going to cover some really cool stuff, especially if you are a consultant or if you work with consultants. This is going to be a great episode for you. We're going to, first of all, we'll talk about, so we'll get to some social media questions to start off, and then we'll get into some newsworthy topics. Two things in particular on the newsworthy topics front. One is that everyone but Meta is in this new AI standards group. So we're going to talk about that and what it means to Meta and just AI standards in general. And then we'll also talk about how Google has unveiled a budget tracker framework to rein in AI agent costs. So we're going to dig into that to see what Google is doing to ensure that AI agents don't become too expensive for end customers. And then later in the show, we'll have Jonathan Whipple on the show, who is the CEO of Lander Talent, which is a company that he and I started together to do staffing for IT and digital transformation projects. He's going to be on the show talking about the talent mistakes that cost CIOs millions. So what are those big mistakes that you need to avoid, and what are the things you need to do to build the right team to ensure that you save time and money in your digital transformation and IT efforts? And then later in the show, after Jonathan, we'll have a discussion around what you really need to know about working with the Big Four consulting firms. So a lot to cover here today, but before we jump into some of those topics, Darian, what are some of the questions we've received recently on social media?
Yeah, a good first question today. It's, Eric, I completely agree with you. Most failed ERPs are really failed operating model changes. Do you see more success when change is led from the business, COO or CFO, rather than IT?
Yeah, great question. And I tend to, if I do have a bias when it comes to digital transformations, it is that I think the projects tend to go better when you have either the COO or CFO as, at the very least, a co-sponsor with IT. Sometimes it can be even more effective or more powerful to have them as the executive sponsor with IT supporting the project. Now, you don't want to exclude IT completely, obviously, because there is a heavy technical angle or component that goes into these projects. But to the person's question and point, which is a really good one, these projects are more about the target operating model and defining what you want your future state to be and what you want to be when you grow up. The problem with IT, just as a broad generalization, which is not true for everyone, but as a generalization, IT staffs or IT teams tend to be more focused on the technology, and they tend to get more into decision making that revolves around technical philosophies versus business needs. So in other words, you're more likely to get an IT person who's a purist about, cloud first. I want this to be a cloud first solution, or I want a single ERP system that's fully integrated because I don't want to have to build out the IT staff to support a best of breed environment, let's just say. And that may or may not be the right answer for the business, but what's more important is what's right for the business. It might be that things are a little bit more difficult for the IT staff to support what the business needs or wants. And IT staffs they tend to drink the Kool-Aid a little bit more when it comes to, strengths or biases as it relates to certain types of technology or software vendors. And again, this isn't always true, but as a generalization, you tend to get some of those biases on the technology side that aren't necessarily helpful for building out your future state of the business. So I think if you can get the COO or CFO to be that key executive sponsor, at the very least a co-sponsor, that is a lot more effective in general than just having the IT staff do it. Some of the best executive sponsors I've ever worked with in our client base are COOs, or sometimes one time we had someone who's the head of HR and talent management was the executive sponsor, and that was really good too. So some of the best executive sponsors, in fact, there's 2 or 3 that come to mind as the best executive sponsors, the strongest at what they do. They knew very little about technology, but they knew the business really well, and they understood the culture. They understood what the organization was trying to accomplish. So I think there's something to be said for that strong business knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. Our next question today is more on the career side of things, which is, Eric, do you need to learn JavaScript before jumping into ServiceNow? Or can people start without it and learn along the way?
I'd say, generally speaking, whether it's ServiceNow or really any technology solution, you don't necessarily need to know the detailed programming language behind it or the development language behind it. Of course, if you're a developer, you do. But if you're a functional consultant, I mean, there's a lot of demand for just functional consulting, people that know how to use the software, they know how to configure it. Maybe they don't know how to code or how to develop in it. But in today's day and age where customization is becoming increasingly frowned upon, there's more of a focus on leveraging technology out of the box and off the shelf. Knowing the development language behind technology is probably less important today than it was 10 or 20 years ago. So I think there absolutely is a way you can jump into your career without knowing detailed programming languages.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, some great questions today, but I want to switch gears and get into our first newsworthy article of the day. This one is about Meta and super interesting with a quick update. So here's a quick version of kind of what's happening with them right now. There's a new AI standards group that just formed with a bunch of major tech and enterprise vendors. And one notable company isn't participating, which is Meta. That's important because standards groups aren't just about collaboration. They're about who gets to define the rules. Those rules often shape regulation, procurement requirements, and how CIOs evaluate vendors. Meta sitting this out looks a little bit strategic. They've leaned more open, fast-moving AI models and formal standards that can slow down or force constraints they don't want yet. Meanwhile, enterprise vendors do want standards, and it reduces risks, makes compliance easier, and gives buyers something concrete to rely on, especially in regulated industries. So the bigger takeaway for CIOs is this. AI is moving out of the experimental phase and into more core infrastructure. And once something becomes infrastructure, standards, regulation, and vendor power dynamics follow. This isn't really about Meta, but it's more so about who gets to write the rules for enterprise AI and how that could impact innovation, control, and vendor lock-in over the next decade. Eric, with this, who actually benefits the most from these AI standards? And are these groups protecting enterprises or protecting vendors?
It's really interesting. It's a good question. And I was processing as you were talking because I hadn't heard the story. I wasn't familiar with it until now. But I think it's interesting that Meta is not involved, because even if they truly do believe what they say, which I have no reason to think they're making that up, but the part about not wanting to stifle innovation in being in the early stages of AI maturity, it seems like maybe that would be a reason to be involved in the standards board, to ensure that it doesn't take those standards too far or get too stringent on the standards, because maybe there is some merit to what they're saying as far as the need for innovation and flexibility and the ability to change and evolve as an industry. So that part surprises me, but who knows? Maybe they've got a good reason, a good competitive reason why they want to stay away from that. But the part that I'm less certain of is your second part of your question, the vendor lock. What is the purpose of the standards board? Is it to favor vendors, or is it truly to create a friendly environment for AI in general, not just for a vendor lock perspective. But I guess, the thing that I think we have to be careful of as an industry, especially with AI, that AI has so much flexibility and so much it can do. There's only so much standardization you can put in place around some of these technologies. And I think AI has the opportunity to create a lot of flexibility and a lot of competitive ways that businesses can be using AI if they do it right. So if you get too standardized, you're sort of watering down or diluting the potential benefit of AI. So that part I don't quite get or understand, but it is a good question and worth discussion in the industry for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you think that AI standards might reinforce vendor lock-in, or what do you think is going to happen with that?
I don't know. It sounds like maybe that is the intent, because I think the more standard you make software, or that a vendor would make software, the easier it is to get a broad, large population of businesses to standardize or conform to the software so that they can get you locked in and get those recurring subscription revenues, maximized for their own self-interest. So I think I would assume that the intent is to tilt the playing field in favor of the technology providers, not necessarily to make things better for customers. But that's pure speculation on my part. I don't know enough about this particular standards board to know, but just based on how the overall cloud and enterprise tech space has been working recently and pushing so hard to get people to use standard software in the cloud that they can scale and maximize their own revenue, for the tech vendors, makes me think that it's probably, the standards board is probably another step in that direction to help ensure that they can maximize their own revenue.
For sure. And how do you interpret like a major AI player opting out of this committee?
I don't know. It's either it seems like something that's either a really bold, smart move, or it's a terrible idea. I feel like it's not in between. But I don't know which one it is. On one hand, it's Meta, it's Mark Zuckerberg. They're a huge company. Obviously, they have a lot of influence on their own. Maybe they don't need, the other players, or maybe they feel like, they have more to give to the standards group than they would get from it. That's all I can think is maybe, maybe that standards group is good for some of the smaller players that want to, gather together to create what they think the standard should be. But could be the Meta wants to charter its own course, and it might be a good idea. I mean, I feel like Mark Zuckerberg is a pretty smart dude, and I feel like Meta's done pretty well as a company. So I feel like they probably have some pretty strategic reasons behind not being part of it. But it definitely wouldn't be the first time you have a tech company that opts out of a broader, industry movement because they want to be different, or they want to set the tone or set the pace for what they think it should be. So I don't know. I think it's probably a good idea. It sounds like a smart thing, but I don't know the nuances behind it.
For sure. And last thing, what do you think CIOs should do before standards become mandatory?
Say that again. What should CIOs do to do what?
What do you think they should do before standards become mandatory?
Oh, yeah, I don't know. I guess I'd be curious to know if those standards are going to become mandatory.
Yeah.
I suspect they probably will at some point. I imagine that just because AI is going to have the possibility of displacing workers, and it has a possibility to negatively impact, in the short term at least, negatively impact people's livelihood or well-being in the forms of perhaps lost jobs or lost economic opportunity. I feel like that for that reason alone, the government at some point will end up having to, or feeling like they have to regulate it or create standards or enforce certain standards. But to Meta's point, that will absolutely stifle innovation and perhaps competition as well. So I think the intentions might be good, but it seems it's like something that will probably create problems for the AI space. But I think AI, what I worry about with AI is it is stoking a lot of fear. Even just in recent weeks, recent months, you hear of these companies that are alleging that they're laying people off or going to lay people off because of AI. Now, there's questions on, is it really, are you just blaming AI and maybe the economy's bad or your business is weak and you're just blaming it on AI? Or, trying to spin it as something positive that's in your control and this is a good thing that you're laying people off? Or is it because your business is soft and, your business isn't doing well? I don't know. But so either way, regardless, though, it creates a lot of fear amongst people, I think, in general. And I think as people get more and more afraid and as people start to get displaced or blamed for displacement because of AI, I think that's when the government inevitably will have to step in or feel like they have to step in at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. It's super interesting.
It is.
But I want to kind of switch gears to our next newsworthy article of the day, which is about how Google unveils its budget tracker and BATS framework to rein in AI agent costs. So essentially, what is happening is Google researchers just launched two new tools, the budget tracker and a framework called BATS, designed to help AI agents manage their compute and tool calling costs in real time. The budget tracker actually inserts budget awareness into agents' reasoning loop. So the agent knows how much to compute and tool usage it's consumed and how much it has left. That helps prevent agents from going off on expensive, resource heavy logic loops that can balloon costs. BATS, short for budget aware test time scaling, builds on that by letting multi agent systems decide when to dig deeper on a promising strategy versus when to pivot, optimizing cost versus value. This matters because autonomous AI agents are quietly driving enterprise AI budgets way up. Many CIOs are struggling with the unpredictable costs as agents make multiple tool calls and recursive loops without any cost governance. By giving agents real time cost feedback and a way to adapt strategy under a budget cap, these tools could finally help enterprises get a handle on the total cost of ownership for agent deployment instead of being blindsided by a runway of compute bills. So, Eric, with this, is real time budget awareness the missing piece for enterprise AI governance? And how big of a deal is it when agents start thinking about costs while they reason?
Well, I think the intent sounds good in theory, like as though it might help contain costs for end customers, because I think that's the thing that I worry about as it relates to vendor lock is once you get locked into a certain vendor, let's just say it's a cloud solution. Now you're locked in. You've got this fixed cost now that isn't going away. It's only going to escalate over time. And now you add AI agents, and AI agents can proliferate very quickly in an organization, especially because they make it so easy for people to create agents. But as vendors start to bill for agentic AI, like the number of agents, and start treating the AI agents as users of a system, I mean, those costs can spiral out of control really quickly. So it sounds good in theory, but I guess I have trouble understanding or believing that a big tech company is going to put in its own tool to control costs to the customer when it's actually going to decrease the vendor's revenue. It's almost like the fox guarding the hen house. Like, trust us, the AI agents are going to contain their own costs. Like, why would the AI agents control their own costs? Or it'd be too easy to say, well, they're going to try a little bit. We're going to make sure it doesn't try too hard to save costs because we still want to generate revenue for our company. So I'm not sure that I believe it. I guess would be to say I have no reason. They haven't. I don't want to accuse anyone of lying, but I have trouble believing that will stick long term. But it sounds good in theory, and if there is an altruistic drive behind this and they can stick to it, that's great. I just have trouble believing that that's going to stick long term.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. But I guess what does this mean? Like, let's say it does stick. I'm going to play a little bit of the other side here.
Right.
What does that mean for multi-agent systems? Can this help prevent agent chaos, or like where nested agents maybe trigger like spiraling costs potentially?
Yeah. I mean, if it's a matter of like not sucking up a bunch of computing power that it doesn't need or that could be optimized, then yes, I think that's true. And that's actually when you first were telling me about this article, I was thinking that that's what they were referring to as reducing, like Google reducing their own costs, not necessarily costs to customers. So that's what I thought at first, but it turns out it sounds like it's actually trying to save their customers money. So I think it's actually a cool idea, and I like it, and I hope it does stick. So I hope I'm wrong, but I think it could have a big impact on customers' IT costs, because those can get pretty gnarly pretty quick. I saw a stat that just the other day. It was a stat that there's, I think, 90% of CIOs or 90% of organizations are apparently investing heavily in AI in 2026, but it's all going to be incremental. So in other words, it's not replacing. They're not like taking money from other places to pay for AI. It's incremental spending that they're adding on top of what they were already going to spend on, ERP or whatever systems they already have in place. So, so I do think that, companies are getting more serious about investing in it. So I think being smart about how they spend the money is a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's super interesting. I found both of the articles today super interesting for sure, but I'm excited to get into today's conversation.
Yeah, we're going to bring Jonathan Whipple on the show. He's been on this podcast, I think once before, maybe twice. And he has been on talking about things related to talent and culture and building the right internal teams. And he's going to be back again today talking about some of the biggest mistakes that CIOs make when it comes to building teams that can cost them millions. So we're going to talk about those staffing mistakes, whether you're building your own internal team and or bringing in outside resources to help to support your project. Some of those mistakes that you make in that hiring or recruiting process can cost you a lot of money, especially if you're in the middle of a big spend project like a digital transformation or ERP or an AI project like we were just talking about. So we're going to bring him on the show. We're going to talk about those talent mistakes that can cost leaders millions of dollars. And then later in the show, we'll talk about what it's really like working with Big Four consulting firms. So stick around. We've got a lot more to cover. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
How can you see into my eyes like open doors?
I'm excited to announce the release of our 2025 Digital Transformation Report. It's available now on the Third Stage Consulting website, www.thirdstage-consulting.com. This report gives you an unbiased, technology-agnostic insight to help you optimize your organization's projects for success. Get your copy today using the QR code in front of me or on our website.
I want to encourage you to read our Guide to Organizational Change Management. It's a free report or free guide that we publish. It's one that I actually wrote that talks about best practices and lessons learned as it relates to change management. So as you know, on this podcast, we cover a lot of stuff related to the human sides of change, organizational change management, including training, communications, org design, all kinds of stuff as it relates to change management. So if you're trying to learn more about change management or you're looking for more direction and ideas on how to get started on your change management strategy and your overall journey, be sure to check out this guide. You can read it by scanning the QR code on the screen in front of you or in the links below for this particular podcast episode. You can find a link to take you to the page that will allow you to register to go ahead and download that and read it for free. So be sure to check it out. It's the Guide to Organizational Change Management, written by yours truly. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think, and hope you enjoy the rest of this episode.
Wake me up inside. I can't wake up. Wake me up inside. Call my name and save me from.
Hello, and welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 253. This is the podcast that is tech agnostic, covering all things related to strategy, people, process, and technology. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of the show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also see past episodes of this show by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, an independent tech agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. If you'd like to learn more about us and how we can help you in your digital transformation journey, please feel free to reach out to me. I've included my contact information below. So our first guest of the show, I should say, is Jonathan Whipple. He's the CEO of Lander Talent, which is a tech agnostic talent and staffing firm. So if you're an organization that is looking to hire internal resources or maybe bringing in outside contractors or potential contract to hire resources for your project, Lander Talent is a company you want to know. And Jonathan's a person that you want to know because he can help with that stuff. He and his team can help with that. So all that being said, Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Eric.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being here again. And before we jump into the talent discussion, tell us a little bit about Lander. It's a company you and I have started together, but you're the main brain behind it. So tell us a little bit about what Lander does and how it fits into the overall marketplace.
Yeah, I mean, we find the best IT and ERP talent in the market and fill roles. We are very, very, very focused on impact and helping organizations really right the ship, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, tell us a little bit, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about your background. You have such an interesting background. That's the non-traditional route to end up where you are here today. I don't know anyone who's ever said, "Hey, I want to be an ERP recruitment expert" as a kid. and I don't know if that was your case, but it sounds like you had maybe a detour in life that kind of sort of led you here. Tell us a little bit about that detour and how you ended up in this space.
I'd like to say that growing up, I was just like sitting on my bed dreaming of digital transformation and helping, helping folks with implementations. But you're right. There was a big detour. So the first part of my career was producing television and in reality TV specifically. So I worked in casting and it was finding the right person for the right role. So you can see the overlap. The difference there is, I was looking for people who wanted to win $1 million or get married at first sight or, transfer their career from, say Grammy award-winning artist to television host. So it was a lot of fun, but I mean, I was ready for a new challenge, and I guess you could just say I like finding the right person for the right role. I want them to avoid the wrong role.
Right.
Yeah.
And I imagine coming from that TV background too, it's so there's so much, I imagine, psychology and chemistry and things you've got to look for that are not, you're not looking at people on paper. You're looking at what's going to drive ratings or what's going to make for an interesting story or an interesting show. So I imagine that those nuances of finding that kind of talent, I imagine that would help you quite a bit here in this space, in the IT space.
I think it's my unfair advantage. Not everybody has that experience of interviewing thousands of people and putting 10,000, 100,000 hours into interviewing day in and day out. But you really start to your pattern recognition becomes very strong, and it's like I said, it's an unfair advantage, and I love helping companies with it.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that I'm not the only person in this industry that did not dream of being an ERP consultant or a digital transformation expert. That is not what I was dreaming of as a kid.
Oh my gosh, I'm shocked. I thought you would have had it like in your journal, man. Like,
yeah,
just
my vision board when I was 5 years old was
yeah.
To be a digital transformation consultant. So of all those shows you worked on, do you have like a favorite show that you had the most fun working on, or you had the most staffing for? Because you've worked on some really interesting reality shows.
I mean, my favorite, because going back to being a child, Lego is such a core part of who I am. I mean, there's even I think over my shoulder here, you see like a little Lego Boba Fett. I did a show called Lego Masters, which is a competition show about building Lego. My son loves Lego. My wife loves Lego. So being able to tap into something that's such a part of who I am and who I was as a kid. I did Lego Masters was really a standout for me personally.
So you kind of did live your childhood dream, doing the Lego show. Just ended
a
up
little bit.
It led you to something even cooler, which is digital transformation, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I want to say hello to some of the people joining us from in the audience here today. Someone on LinkedIn, and I apologize, I don't see the name, but someone joining from Copenhagen in Denmark. So thanks for being here. Someone on YouTube joining from Dallas. George is on LinkedIn joining from Nairobi, Kenya. Sandra is joining on YouTube from Chicago. Thanks for being here today. And then Carmen is joining us here today. I think she's in Chicago, or I know her. She lives in Chicago. I don't know if she's there right now, but Carmen says, I loved Lego Masters. So you're not alone here. You've got some fellow Lego Masters fans here. Carmen also says people strategy is very important. Understanding people and having EQ is key. And I guess, that's a good segue into a first question here. When we think about hiring people for an IT, whether it's an IT project or you're trying to hire someone for your IT staff, like an architect or a business analyst, whatever it is, it's easy to really get not bogged down, but myopically focused on what's on the resume, what's on paper. Do they have the right skills? Do they have the qualifications? Do they know the right programming language? Whatever. What are some of the EQ types of nuances you look for in terms of emotional intelligence or just overall EQ? What are some of the things you look for when you're trying to find the right person for the right job?
Great question. And I totally agree on the EQ front, Carmen. When I'm looking and trying to identify EQ and anything in the soft skill arena, it starts with that initial call, maybe even an initial message. How does that conversation flow on the screen, or on your phone, if you're texting, email, whatever it may be, but it gets to that first conversation. Are you connecting, and how how are you connecting? You know, is it a thoughtful conversation, or is it somebody that's just attempting to get as much information to you as possible? Because if we're having a conversation, or you're having a conversation with a hiring manager, whoever it may be, you're having that conversation for a reason. They're probably aware of what your experience is. So a big portion of this is connection and chatting with somebody. Like you're chatting with them over coffee, but like a really serious coffee, you know?
Right.
I think it comes down to connection.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard to put your finger on that, and you're not going to see it on a resume.
Yeah. Cause it's so much about feeling, and it's going to depend, you know, on the other person on the other end of the line. You know, like you're not going to connect with everybody. I mean, maybe you are. If you connect with everybody and you have all the digital transformation skills in the world, please send me your resume.
Right.
Please. Like you're in the highest possible demand. But connection, and yeah, I think connection is the core of it.
Yeah. So that's one common mistake that organizations can make is, you know, maybe not focusing enough on EQ and maybe the cultural fit of the person, not, you know, setting aside the skills and the sort of the minimum qualifications. It's that extra piece of it that I would imagine is a big mistake a lot of teams make, or a lot of CIOs make when they're trying to build up their teams. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see CIOs make when it comes to building out their teams internally and or externally?
Yeah, I think that the biggest one, like it maybe not shocking, but it's one wrong senior hire. Like if you miss at the top of the org chart, that's the biggest possible miss, because senior hires, they don't miss quietly, you know, like they don't fail alone. You know, you've got somebody whose decisions are going to ripple across teams, across vendors, across timelines. You know, this one person that is a senior hire, I mean, their problems multiply across dozens of people, right? You know, it's not a bad hire. It's a bad multiplier, and that's a problem.
Right. Yeah. That makes total sense. Want to just get back to some of the audience questions here. Got someone on LinkedIn joining from Florida. Thanks for being here today. And Carmen is indeed from freezing Chicago. So thank you for joining. I suppose you have nothing better to do than to listen to us talk. If it's that cold out, you maybe just don't want to go outside. Darian's joining us on LinkedIn, says good morning. Thank you for that. And then Carmen has a follow-up here. Connection and authenticity. People buy from people. So it's a great point. That connection that you're talking about, Jonathan, I think that's something that's easy to overlook, especially as we get so focused on like, do they have the right? Do they know AI? Do they know the newest version of S4HANA? Do they know public cloud? You know, it's like you get so honed in on these technical skills that it can be really easy to overlook that cultural fit. And I'm sure you've seen this too, but I've seen some really smart, very talented people that are just terrible fits, because it's not because they don't have the right hard skills. It's because those soft skills, they don't have the temperament to be a good collaborator or a good listener, or someone that can empathize with change or whatever. I mean, is that something you've seen as well?
Absolutely. I mean, you have to be a part of a team. I mean, unless you're working in a complete silo, you're working entirely detached from everybody else, and your outcomes have nothing to do with other people. Like it's very important to connect. Like if it's not there, like there's a major problem. There's a major problem.
Yeah. And it's not just, the person connecting with the organization, but it's also like, you want different types of people that can bring diverse personalities and opinions, but you also want them to be cohesive and part of one team. How do you find that balance, between like, I don't want us all to look the same on this team that I'm building, this project team or this IT team, but I don't want them to be so different that they can't collaborate together. So how do you navigate that when you're trying to help someone put together the right team?
It's tricky, you've got to thread the needle, and there's so much priority placed on culture fit today, and I think rightfully so. But I think something that gets overlooked, and is culture add. And I know that's a lot of what you're talking about in terms of diversity and different viewpoints. Culture add is so incredibly important. Being able to, I think when you're looking at things as additive, it's like that game you play in the living room when you're a kid, where you're like knocking a balloon and keeping it up into the air. There's like flair that each person brings. Like as a kid, you're trying to keep this up in the air. What you want to do is have people who can, knock that balloon around, keep that idea in the air, and do something new with it, innovate and bring it forward. The fit is something that you should see. Like if you're looking for somebody, how they're going to fit in the team, but they should add to it. Your culture, ideally with a perfect hire, with an A+ hire, is improving in a way that you don't see yet. Like that is the ultimate unspoken goal. That's what I hope happens.
Right. Yeah. Well, very well said. Harwinder on LinkedIn says, good to see you, Jonathan, and Eric together. So thank you for that, Harwinder. I think it is a pretty awesome combo myself, but I'm biased,
I'm a big fan of Harwinder, and I totally agree. I think we're a great combo, and Harwinder, I love you, man.
That's awesome. Here's a really good question from VJ on LinkedIn. VJ says, how do you strike the right balance between building in-house expertise and bringing in outsourced talent? Which approach do you think pays off better in the long run? I love this question because it's something that a lot of our clients struggle with. A lot of the clients you've worked with, I know over the years, have struggled with this. How do you find that right balance? What's the right answer? Is there a right answer?
Oh man, it's funny because VJ, this is honestly so much of what Eric and I talk about every day because it is a fine balance. I think it's incredibly important to have the right in-house talent. You have to have somebody that can check whoever it is that you're working with. Like the external talent is incredibly important, and it's always outcome driven, trying to reach a deadline and trying to hit a goal. And that's important. That's, if you're in the middle of a digital implementation, that's everything. But who owns it? Who is making sure that this is getting done? And more importantly, who is making sure that this is going to have the impact that is required, that you're hoping for once everything goes live, once everything is done, once every goal is met, and every milestone is achieved. You need somebody on the other side. Many companies and so many teams wait until the end, or wait until like, I didn't even know I needed this. So I am very happy that you're asking that, VJ, because it's sorely missed.
Yeah, it's a real thing, and it's easy to err too far on one side or the other. We've had some clients who will say, "Hey, we're just going to outsource this entire thing to outside contractors or a consulting firm." We've had other clients that say, "We're going to do it all ourselves. We'll just hire the people and manage them ourselves." I think the reality is you need somewhat of a balance. I mean, you want to build. You don't want to be over dependent on consultants or software vendors for sure, but you also don't want to miss out on the outside expertise that can help make the project more successful. So I think that's, and plus, if you have some internal staff to help manage the project, you're just more likely to keep it on track and have a team there that's representing you and looking out for your business interests, not just trying to push technology or push a technological agenda from the outside. So
absolutely.
Here's a couple other comments here. Carmen clarifies that she's not slacking off. She's actually working. Loves turning it into our crew. Have a great day. Very Merry Christmas. So thank you for that, Carmen. Merry Christmas to you as well.
Merry Christmas.
And there's a couple really good questions here in the audience that I have to get to. These are good ones. So this is from Sanjay on LinkedIn. Sanjay says, how do we foster a culture of continuous learning and innovation within our IT team to avoid employee stagnation and burnout? So once you've got the team, how do you keep them motivated, keep them learning, innovative, keep them from getting stale or maybe too focused on internal stuff? What have you seen work there?
That's a great question. And it's going to be specific to each individual team. But for me, I'm a bit of a nerd. So I love learning and I love nerding out with other people. So one way that that I love to do this. It's kind of the same way when you're sharing the television show you're binging, right? Like I've been watching Stranger Things. Here's this thing I love about it. Have you seen this show before? Like, you have to get just as excited about learning as you are about the things that fill water cooler talk. So if your water cooler talk can transform into this exciting thing that you're learning, that is the dream scenario. And I think that it's happened quite a bit in the last few years, very specifically around AI, because everybody is dabbling with it at this point, right? Or everybody is like an expert, but like if you look back 18 months or 2 years ago, when people were first like, oh, ChatGPT dropped, this is available, to me as a consumer, like, here's what I'm using it for. Think about that piece of using AI for the first time. Think about the first time you used something like social media. What's the first time you used Twitter or Facebook? And oh, wait, I can do this and I can update this. Nerd out about the thing and make it exciting. What you want is that exchange of ideas and information. And, oh, wow, I learned this. You learned that. Well, I actually dove into this YouTube channel last night and started to figure it out.
Yeah, you're kind of alluding to a passion, and it sort of gets back to the cultural thing you're talking about too, or the EQ. When you're building a team, you're speaking at it from the perspective of, if you're a candidate or if you're a team member, stay excited, share the excitement, make it contagious, all that good stuff. But same with I imagine when you're recruiting people, if you can find someone who has that thirst for knowledge and is constantly trying to get better and understands that they don't have all the answers, I think that's really important too. Like someone that understands that I can always be better. I can always be learning something new. I don't have all the answers because things are changing so fast. I think all that stuff's important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very cool. And then here's a juicy question from Sandra on YouTube. And she says, do you believe that the use of applicant tracking systems and selecting candidate pools has contributed to hiring mistakes? Especially, I might add to that too, the layer of AI, because I think it was Workday. I can't remember if it was Workday or if it was Oracle Talent. One of the big HCM solution providers in the market, I think, got sued, or they acknowledged that there was bias in their AI, screening process or whatever. What are your thoughts here on applicant tracking systems? Does that create any sort of biases or hiring mistakes? Have you seen that be a problem in the past?
It's interesting because yes, I have not firsthand, but it's one of those like one of those war story things that are shared from between recruiters. At least not in the way that I use an ATS myself, because it's more a person moving along the actual process. Like, here's where they are, they've applied. Like, okay, now they're in the first interview. I'm using it more from a visual standpoint, but as you mentioned, there have been lawsuits. There are biases built in, and unbeknownst, right? Nobody's building a tool and trying to make it have a bias in the first place. But certainly, yes, Sandra.
Especially when you combine that fact with what you were talking about earlier about, needing to focus on more than just the hard skills that show up in an applicant tracking system, the culture and the connection, all the stuff you were talking about, the quest for learning, that doesn't necessarily show up in an ATS. So you've got to look beyond, ATS can be one tool, but you don't want to be overly dependent on that to determine, who the best candidates are, I would imagine.
Absolutely. I agree there. And I think that there is now quite a bit of light at the end of the tunnel in terms of that. So if you think about like early iterations of AI kind of predating all of us using it day to day, it certainly has been built into, ATS systems for a while. And that it was young, rudimentary technology that's really looking at how long has this person, like looking at dates and looking at titles. So now, thankfully, there's a lot more nuance to AI inside of ATS that it's able to find things better. But yeah, I think we've got a ways to go as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's a comment from Scott on LinkedIn. Scott says, I believe leaders find out what makes each person tick. They tailor the rewards at the individual level. When you think back to your favorite boss, I bet it's because you felt understood by them and valuable to them. The team is a wrapper that groups individuals. It's a really interesting point, Scott. So thank you for that.
I totally agree. I totally agree. If you've got a leader that is tailoring incentives and rewards to you as a person, that is the dream. That is the ideal. Like, I think I said this morning on LinkedIn, but like the major perk of your job isn't the compensation. It's like the best possible perk is feeling great at 10 a.m. on Monday morning. Like that's where you want to be.
Like, I'm enjoying this. I'm having fun doing this.
Yeah.
I like being here. I'm not thinking about how I'm sad because the weekend's over. I'm actually enjoying this.
Yeah, I'm here and I'm excited. Like that's what you want to do. And if that's what you're bringing, who are you hiring? I got a bunch of people for you, Scott.
Yeah, exactly. got just the team for you, Scott.
Come on, Scott.
And I know a guy, Scott, that can help you continue building that team. He's on the screen here with me. Here's a longtime listener, Laik, and I apologize, Laik. After all these years of you listening and watching, I should probably know how to pronounce your name. So I apologize if I'm mispronouncing it. But thank you for joining again today. He's got a long comment here that doesn't all show up on the screen, but I'll read it here. Laik on LinkedIn says, balance is the key. You need an internal team that owns the outcome and stays focused on real business success. But you also need outside talent that truly knows the vendor software and can challenge it in your favor, like a devil's advocate on your side. That's why working with a smaller firm can be a smart move. They are often closer to the work, more hands-on, and more willing to speak up when something doesn't make sense. So I think that's very, very well said. The balance, I think, is really important. I think that's back to what you and I were talking about, Jonathan. Just, you want to build that internal team. You also want to leverage outside people, but you don't want to go too far to one extreme or the other.
Absolutely. I think you want the advocate in both directions. I like the way that Laik said that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting question from Darian on LinkedIn. Darian says, how do you actually assess connection in a hiring process without relying on gut instinct alone? So, and maybe another way to put this would be, how do you develop that muscle? Like if I'm not used to looking for that and I don't have a strong gut instinct one way or the other, what am I looking for when I'm trying to assess someone's connection, cultural fit, fit with my overall team, all that stuff?
It's a tricky one because it's an intangible, like it's so hard to really sum it up, but it's important to find a place for that to fit on the scorecard. So I think it's measured in silence. Silence, I think, is probably the biggest indicator. It's the biggest thing that you can measure and see. So if things stop flowing, some silence is good. You want to be able to have pauses and have breaks and have that. But I think silence is probably the biggest way to assess it in terms of something that you can look for. But that's on the it's adverse. It's negative, right? So I think that's the easiest way, and a lot of it is measuring with your gut.
So when you say silence, then it's almost like if you're interviewing a candidate, talking to a candidate for the first time, and it's just flowing, there's an energy and a spark between you and the candidate. It's like you said, flowing. That's a good indicator. But if it's not, it just stops, then that might tell you there's not that connection. There's not that that interest on either both sides, and getting to know one another, whatever the case may be. Not because they're bad people, but maybe it's just not the right personality fit or whatever.
You got it. If it's not there, it's not there. And silence is the indicator. Yeah.
What about the opposite though? Have you ever had a situation where this person is just perfect cultural fit? I mean, I'm connecting with them. There's a good energy. I think this is going to be a good vibe or fit with whoever I'm staffing or placing this person to. But then they get in there, great cultural fit, people like them, but then they don't have the hard skills, or they don't maybe have the technical chops that you thought. So in other words, is it easy or is it common to get blinded by strong cultural fit, that you get blinded to the fact that they don't have the technical competencies or the hard skills? So it's sort of the opposite of what we were talking about.
So yes, I have seen that happen. And it's a double-edged sword, right? I think the way that I look at things is always if the connection is there, the skills can be built. I mean, unless, I'm hiring a doctor, and then like that requires so much time to get to that point. But I've built out teams myself where the people underneath me did not have the skills on day one. The soft skills were there in spades, everything you could have ever hoped for, and it really comes down to development. So I think that is incredibly important, and that kind of comes back to, I guess we haven't chatted on this, but onboarding has to be right. Here are the outcomes, here is what we were looking for, here are the goals for 30, 60, 90 days, here's where I hope you are a year from now. That all has to be very, very, very clear. Especially when you're hiring solely on a vibe check. If it is that vibe and that connection, and that is somebody that's going to be additive to your culture, that's way harder to find than somebody that has the actual skill. But you need a great leader up top who can then actually build that team and make sure that those skills come to fruition and develop over time.
Yeah. I know for me, that's in this overall question about, cultural fit, and, what if you have the cultural fit, but not the tangible hard skills fit? That's the hardest thing for me as a leader to navigate, honestly. Cause it's like, if I know someone's a good cultural fit, but they don't quite hack it in terms of the technical hard skills, that's really hard for me. Like, I'd struggle with that as a leader, because I will err on the side of cultural fit to a fault sometimes. And we actually had one person that was, with our company, a guy I love. Like, he's a great guy and really good cultural fit. He's with us for a few years, but as we grew, it just got to the point where like it just wasn't a good fit, like for the skill, the hard skills. And that I really struggled with that. I probably waited too long, to move forward with what needed to happen there. But that it's a hard one. So I struggle. So this is interesting for me, because I do struggle with that quite a bit. I think I learned a long time ago, though, not to focus solely on hard skills, which is good. But there are times now where I almost like I overcorrect and go too far the other way. I'm here with Jonathan Whipple. We're talking about talent mistakes that can cost CIOs millions. We've got a lot more to cover. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
Hey, feeling good, like I should. When in dark, walk around the neighborhood, feeling blessed.
I want to share a little bit of information about Third Stage Consulting and who we are. Third Stage Consulting Group is an independent, technology agnostic provider of consulting services to help clients through their digital transformations. We help with digital strategy and software selection, as well as implementation planning. And during implementation, we provide services related to program management, organizational change, business process improvement, as well as enterprise architecture. These are just some of the services we provide. We have offices in North America, as well as Europe and Asia Pacific. So if you'd like to learn more, I encourage you to check out our resource center, which includes a number of resources that will help you through your digital transformation. And you can access that for free using the QR code here or the links below. You can also reach out to me directly if you'd like to discuss your digital transformation and brainstorm ideas on how to improve where you're headed on your journey.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Feeling good, like I should. When in dark, walk around the neighborhood, feeling blessed, never stressed. Got that sunshine on my.
Welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 253. My name is Eric Kimberling, here with Darian Chwialkowski, and I'm here with Jonathan Whipple, and we're talking about talent mistakes that can cost CIOs millions. Good stuff. So I want to say hello to Passer on YouTube, joining from Poland. So thanks for being here today. I don't know why I've noticed recently a lot of people from Poland are starting to follow me. So apparently I'm huge. You and I think, are becoming huge in Poland, from what I understand.
Poland, we're on our way. We're coming. Yeah. We're coming to a town near you.
Yeah, Warsaw. We'll have an office here soon.
Oh yeah.
Here's another really good question from Darian on LinkedIn. Darian says, "What capabilities must never be outsourced, regardless of budget or timelines?" So are there certain like deal breakers or showstoppers where you say you need to have this person in-house, or maybe the opposite too? This person you don't want to bring in-house. You want to bring in an outside expert to help you in this area.
That's such a great question. And I think it's always going to come down to what the organization needs themselves and what they prioritize. But I think ownership over specific lanes should always be in-house. You need somebody who owns the finished product, or the post-finished product, somebody who that's going to fit into their lane, and that's something that they're running with. So whoever owns it at the end, that is not something that should be outsourced. The person who sees, and we were just talking about this the other day, but sees this become boring, that's what you want.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, okay, so we've talked about a lot of different mistakes that could cost CIOs millions. And one we haven't gotten to yet, that you and I have talked about before, is, and we haven't talked about it yet today though, and that is that rushed fill. That, I've got a project, for whatever reason, I'm in a rush to start it. Maybe my vendor's pressuring me because they're going to bring in all the consultants next week, and I've got to get my team mobilized and ready. Tell us about rust hires? Like, do you see that often? What are some of the pitfalls there? What are some of the consequences of that? Tell us about this, because you want to act with a sense of urgency on one hand, but on the other hand, getting a wrong hire internally or externally can be very costly. So what's some advice you have there?
Urgency is usually how bad hires sneak in. On the staffing side, I like to fill things as quickly as possible, right? I like to move fast, and that is important. But there's a difference when you get to the point where the pain of the business problem gets louder than judgment. That's how the bad hires start to sneak in. So in those sort of situations, depending on how fast you go, usually, I guess, on one hand, you're moving very fast, but it's going to slow the organization. So yeah, I think it's a lot of deferred pain. So you want this short-term relief, but ultimately you're going to pay twice to fix it. So you still need to maintain structure in your process and really, make sure that you're hiring the right person.
Right. Yeah. What about at the senior level? When you're looking at senior hires, what are some of the mistakes or pitfalls of that, of potentially getting that kind of a hire wrong? Like let's call it a project manager, or maybe it's if you're a CIO and you're hiring a director of enterprise applications, or, some senior person within your IT organization. Tell us about maybe a lesson or lessons from making bad senior hires.
Well, bad senior hires usually trigger other bad hires, so you've got, it kind of goes back to what we were chatting on earlier of it's a multiplier. You hire the wrong person, they make the wrong decisions, suddenly timelines get pushed out. Suddenly they've hired the wrong person. It's kind of like when you have this big, if you look behind my desk right now, all the wires are tangled up. Like once you finally determine, oh shoot, this is the thing I have to fix, right? Like I've got my monitors out, I've got to change this, or in this case, the bad senior leader, you have to untangle the rest of the mess, and now you've got 6 months added on to your implementation time. You've got 2 other people leading different things that you need to remove. You've got different processes in place that actually are not impacting what you need them to impact. It's untangling all of this mess that was created from one single leader, and you got to get it right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you talked about triggering other bad hires, which is actually a really good point. I hadn't really thought of it that way before, but it's a great point that you bring in that senior person. If that's a bad hire, whether it's a cultural bad fit or just whatever it is, now that's going to spread and propagate in the form of other candidates that person ends up hiring that maybe is also a bad fit. But also think about the decisions that senior leadership on an IT team make. Something as significant as, we are going to rip out our ERP system and put in SAP, or we're going to put in Microsoft. They just make these decisions that, on the surface may not sound like a bad thing, but they might be making these decisions based on their own biases and, You know, if they're not a good fit and they're not going to be around for the long haul, you know, you're going to inherit these decisions that they make, and that may not be what the rest of the team wants or what's right for the business. So that's the other thing too, is it's like major technological decisions end up getting made that are going to affect your company for years to come, and that alone could cost you millions, you know, if you go down the wrong path or the wrong technology or a flawed digital strategy or whatever the case may be.
100%.
Yeah, that's the worst when you see that. I mean, I always, you know, those are hard to undo too, because a lot of times once those decisions get baked, you can't just unwind it all. Even, you know, just because that senior person didn't work out and they left, you're still stuck with, you know, you've inherited these decisions that were made, you know, by the predecessor.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What about we haven't talked yet about role definitions.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're hiring, tell us about maybe some common mistakes or challenges with having clarity around what it is you're hiring for. Like, it's not enough to say, I need to hire an architect. Well, what do you need? You know, what do you want from that role? Tell us about, you know, what some of the common pitfalls are here.
When success isn't clear, failure gets so expensive. So it has to be clear what somebody does in their role. A lot of times roles, they tend to, you know, you're trying to put yourself out in the market and share an exciting role, an exciting opportunity, right? Like, a job description doubles as duties and marketing for what your company is. So you want to attract the right person, but a lot of priority is placed on that. So it has to be clear what the person is going to do, because misalignment causes so much rework, and then rework spreads, just, you know, like a bad senior leader, like we were just talking about, and then time disappears. So you have to start up front and be as clear as possible, because the fuzzier it gets, the more expensive it gets.
Yeah. Now, how about you know, from a candidate's perspective? You know, if I'm a candidate and I'm trying to navigate my career and look at, you know, next project moves or staffing moves I might want to make, what would you say, like, what advice would you have as far as what some of the hottest areas are in IT right now? Like, areas that you think are going to be, you know, especially fruitful for candidates and good career opportunities? Are there certain, like, software vendor types of implementations or types of technologies or types of roles that you think are going to be really hot in the next 3 or 5 years we may not be thinking about already?
Yeah, I think things that are in the low code, no code space, you know, being an individual that maybe is not traditionally a builder in that sense, having that ability to build low code and no code, I think is something that is going to become more and more important. Being able to create your own, you know, mini solution on the fly. I think things in the AI space, specifically on ethics and governance and how that AI works, is something that's is going to be very interesting. But I think overall, anything AI, like it's so obviously everybody's saying it, and you've been joking about it in videos lately about how passionate you are about AI, right? But it's how does AI plug into things, and how does it work, and how can you move faster? And I think also thinking very non-traditionally. I think I'm trying to think of who coined this, and I think it's Rona Barnett Pierce. It's a term called workfluencer, but it's people who create content. So not necessarily a role, but if you're able to advocate for your company because you have an audience, that is not a traditional role, but that is a place that people are finding space for inside of their organizations. So it's not a clear role, but it is a cheat code, as the kids say. So
yeah. Workfluencer. I had not heard that. I was not familiar with
I love it. It's such a good term. Yeah.
It really is. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you think AI affects our jobs going forward? I know that's a really big charged question, but you know, you hear all these, especially in the consulting space right now, just given that's what I'm most familiar with is consulting. There's, for example, I saw Emma Roloff is a digital transformation influencer, a fellow influencer on LinkedIn and TikTok, and she posted a video yesterday about how like McKinsey is saying that they're planning thousands of layoffs as a result of AI. So how do you see AI affecting the job market? Because you hear everything from AI is going to replace millions of jobs to, oh, it's not going to replace any jobs. It's just going to make us all better at our jobs. And the answer might be somewhere in between. But what do you think is going to happen with AI? How is it going to affect what you and I do and what others listening here today, our careers in general? Spend a whole hour on that one question.
Yeah. Well, what I hope it does is everybody works less and makes more. Like that's what I hope is the outcome. But I think it's kind of this progressive ladder of, we start by using AI and it helps us with our work. And then we move to a point to we're helping AI and then AI takes over. I think is kind of the progression. It's just a matter of how long is that going to take. So I think for the interim, and that interim could be 5 years, 10 years, 100 years, right? Like however long we have in traditional jobs, I think we should use AI to make ourselves faster and have more time to do the things that we want to do. And that might be other projects at work, or that might be other projects at home, like you name it, like, right? Just find your lane. But I think AI is it's all encompassing. So I don't see it taking away, every job, but like as you said it with like Emma's post about McKinsey, you can put together a prompt right now that is like, okay, here's the deck I would have gotten from McKinsey anyway, and and it didn't take tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars. It took me it took me a few minutes. So,
yeah. I mean, there's also the story in I think it was in Australia involving Deloitte, where the Australian government caught Deloitte using AI and not validating the information from AI to create it was like a $400,000 report that I think it was Deloitte. It was one of the big consulting firms that they had created. And so they're going back to Deloitte saying, hey, we want our money back. Like you used AI to create this. We could have done that. So why are we paying you $400,000 for it? So I think that's something to be aware of in consulting is you do have like, even what we do, like when we do software selections, for example, that used to be like 80% of our revenue, but we're planning for that being 0% of our revenue in the near future because we have to assume people are going to use AI to make these decisions. They're going to do the research. They're going to get the information they need. Maybe they come to us for some human validation or, gap analysis, but those days of like big selection projects for us, we don't see that being around for much longer. But I also wonder, like, if the 3 stages you talked about, like we help AI to start, or AI helps us to start, then we help AI, and then AI takes over. So let's say AI takes over. This is getting super deep here. I'm way off topic a little bit here, but
I love it.
But it is interesting to think about, like, let's say none of us are working, or a lot of us aren't working because AI is doing our jobs for us. Then do we just get paid anyway? Does the government now need to pay for, take care of us? Do the big tech companies make all the money, and now it's their responsibility to ensure society can live? Like, that's what I wonder is like, okay, AI doing stuff for us isn't a bad thing until we don't have jobs and we can't feed ourselves. Like, that's the part I can't see. That's pretty fuzzy to me, but I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. That's completely out. That was completely not in our script of what to cover today, but since we're here.
It's a great question. And like, I guess the economics of it and the philosophy behind it is a really, really, really tricky thing. We're in a free market in a capitalist society, and like that is what we know and what we work with. I can't imagine how things would need to change if suddenly, are we talking about universal basic income or like, I don't know. I really don't, but I think it's a lot of big questions that might be above my pay grade, but I'm all for it,
Yeah.
Hey, if I can go outside and go on hikes every day, okay.
Yeah, as long as we can all survive, I suppose.
As long as we can all survive, man. As long as the mortgage is paid,
Yeah. But then it's like, do the big tech companies and or governments have all the power? Like, just way too much, way too much control and power over all of us. That's the
It's a good question. And well, who's paying them? Like at that point, if people don't work and don't have income and don't, if universal basic income is the thing, or whatever it is, there's what are they paying for? What are you? It kind of breaks my mind, actually. I'm trying to I'm trying to figure it out, and I don't know.
I'm having flashbacks to taking that intro to philosophy class in college, in university. That's how I feel. I feel like we're deep into philosophical meanings of life sorts of questions here, which is fun, but I don't know that we're going to answer that today. Although if the audience has answers, I'd love to hear actually the audience's take on this whole thread of AI and what it means to our jobs and our livelihood in the future. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What are your predictions for 50 years from now? How will have AI impacted us, presumably our kids and grandkids, all that good stuff?
Yeah.
In fact, we already have one comment or response to that from Pastor on YouTube. Pastor says, if we could get that low code crowd to develop and sell or use tools, AI could create jobs too, I think. I like that. I think there's a lot of,
I like that.
It's like, I don't really know, and that's where I am too. I don't really know how this is going to unfold, but it's a good prediction there. So we were talking about job definitions before I took us down this completely random tangent involving the meaning of life and AI. We were talking about job roles and descriptions. We've talked about, the intangibles of hiring the right team. We've talked about, the balance of internal and external resources. Anything we're missing as far as, if I'm a CIO trying to build the right team for my IT staff and or my digital transformation project? Anything else that you could think of as far as pitfalls or big mistakes that executives often make?
Yeah, I think there's a tricky one, and it's not hiring for the problem. Like a lot of times, especially if everything's flying and working perfectly, you're hiring for experience. You're looking at past titles and time in a specific seat instead of what the current need is. So you run into stagnation, right? Work that doesn't move, and you've got this weird gray period where people are waiting for momentum to show up. So I think this tiny little rule of thumb that experience is not output. So, look for great resumes, but remember, whatever the role is, you need a solution.
Right. Yeah.
Past wins don't ship future results.
Yeah. What do you have any examples of candidates that you thought were without naming names, but just examples of candidates that you thought were particularly strong, just a really good, you kind of knocked it out of the park, and maybe one that was like, oops, I messed that up. That wasn't a good fit, that person I placed on this project. Do you have any examples of lessons from both extremes, maybe extreme success and extreme failure?
Well, first of all, I've never made a bad placement. I'm totally kidding.
I know, but if you
I wish that were the case, because you can't always see that. So, in terms of placing the wrong person in the right role, there's certainly been experiences, and it's hard to zero in on one because I also look at casting and look back at that as well. It's the double-edged sword of soft skills also, right? So you find this incredible person who has all of the experience, maybe they've worked for FANG, right? They've worked for Meta or, Google or you name it, and they've got all of this experience, and you assume when you drop them into a smaller organization, this person that's, the LeBron James of their lane is going to be perfect. But sometimes, and maybe more often than anybody would want to admit, that isn't the right fit. You're just hiring for past titles. instead of those current needs. Like that's the trouble. But I've also, even more than that, seen somebody who, hey, like, we can see the impact that this person's going to create. We're in a call, we're in an interview, and they're workshopping with us right now. Like, oh, that's what you guys are working on. Well, have you tried this? Here's what I think you should do. Here's what I did in the past, and this is what that meant for us. Maybe you should just try that. Maybe just work it out. Like, when you find a little solution like that in an interview, and you've got somebody that's already thinking ahead to the results and thinking ahead to solution, like, that is perfect. That's what you want. So they both happen, and they both happen more often than just a perfect fit. I think the extremes are the rule in hiring. But yeah, I think both happen. And I'm sorry I don't have specific examples, because if I did, those people would know who I'm talking about precisely.
Yeah, that's true. That's hard to completely mask the identity.
Just in case they're listening right now.
Yeah, they might be listening right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. It did trigger another question, though, a follow-up, something you just said, and I lost it. It was not the best or worst hire. You were talking about, you were talking about the work situation where, like, you kind of observing how someone collaborates or how they interact, how they problem solve. When you're trying to find that right team member, trying to build out that team, is there a way that you can suss that stuff out, either during an interview or a mock situational analysis of, like, how is this person going to solve problems? How are they going to collaborate or not with my team, the rest of my team, to solve a problem or whatever? How have you seen that? Like, how do you get to that before you bring a person onto the team?
It's actually easier than you'd think. And it's also something that a lot of companies are resistant to, and it's sharing problems. Like, you have to be vulnerable and share the problems that you have, so somebody can come in and show their technical brilliance. That somebody could come in and start showing you their beautiful mind, and here's how things work, and here's how we could fix things, and here's how, you have to open up and show all the warts and all the problems, so somebody can get excited about it. Like, I think so often, and we talked about this earlier, companies want you to look at this, here's this perfect place on a hill that we all work at. And, that's what we all hope to work at. But there are just as many people who look at things and they go, here are the problems. That excites me and I want to fix it. We are at our core as people who want to create solutions, who want to get to the other side of it and achieve goals. Show problems, let people talk about them, and fix them. And if somebody's not offering a solution, that's telling you a lot.
Yeah. That's a great point.
Yeah.
Very cool. So if I'm a candidate or a leader that's trying to staff either my own internal team, or I want to bring in outside contractors to support a need or a project, tell us about how Lander Talent can help and how you help in those cases. How can they get in touch with you? What are the first steps? Maybe help give us an action plan here. What are our next steps?
So landertalent.com, first and foremost, just make it your homepage. Just bookmark it. Let your browser open to that daily. But we've got a couple forms in there, one on the candidate side and one on the client side. Just let us know what you're looking for. I'm happy to grab a coffee with anybody and talk through what their needs are. But one of my favorite things to do right now with Lander, and will probably always be the case, is you and I, Eric, on a cold call with somebody who's just like, hey, I need help. And just like, let's chat through it. Let's spitball. Let's, figure out what it is you need, where we can add value. And I think that's the beauty of our partnership and our ability to work back and forth between Lander and Third Stage is, we can bring a lot of different solutions. Hey, you need some consulting. Hey, do you need a team? Do you need internal resources? Do you need contractors? Like we can cover so much ground together, and that's something that I'm loving right now, and finding very rewarding in the work we do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's been a good, Lander Talent and Third Stage Consulting together are great because not only are we both agnostic, independent, we're focused on digital transformation, ERP, IT, all that stuff. But also, we've got call it the more higher dollar traditional consulting services that Third Stage provides, which isn't mutually exclusive from what Lander does. In many cases, clients want some consulting, but they also want to build out their internal team, or they want to bring in outside contractors that they manage themselves. And it's also, allows you to maybe not be as solely dependent on a large system integrator to get your resources. A lot of times the big SIs will convince you that, hey, you need us to manage your overall project, but you can also bring in your own contractors, your own people that, you manage. Either, you manage yourselves internally. Maybe they become permanent hires. Maybe they start as contract to hire or hourly contractors. So there's a lot of different ways you can navigate this and find the different resources you need to support your project. All right. Thank you, Jonathan. Great conversation. And thank you to the audience for the great questions there as well. We've got a lot more we're going to cover as it relates to that conversation. We're going to build on some of the threads that we were talking about there and do a quick debrief and follow up on that conversation. And then we're also going to talk about, in our last segment, we'll talk about what it's really like working with Big Four consulting firms. So we're going to cover that and more in just a moment. But first, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground.
I met her in a club down in Old Soho, where you drink champagne and it tastes like Coca-Cola. CIOs.
If you're about to embark on the jungle of digital transformation, check out my new book, Welcome to the Jungle. It's a book that just came out in late 2025. It's my second book, and it's a book that focuses on digital transformation failure case studies and talks about the lessons and takeaways from that. It's 300 pages packed of all the lessons and things that I've learned from having been an expert witness in lawsuits related to digital transformations, and also with our team helping clients recover some of their failed projects. I've included as many lessons as I could possibly fit into one book here. You can read this book. You can order it anywhere in the world in hard copy format, which is this format here. You can get it in paperback. You can also get it electronically as well. Scan the QR code right here or go to the links below for your copy. Hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S/4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 253. This is Eric Kimberling and Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. And this podcast is produced by Major Tom Productions. sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. If you'd like to learn more about how we can help with your digital transformation journeys, please reach out to us. I've included my contact information below. And if you're a software solution provider and you'd like to collaborate with us on this podcast or any of our other content, please feel free to reach out to Major Tom Productions. I've included contact information below for that as well. So, Darian, we just had Jonathan on the show. We were talking about some of the big talent mistakes that can cost CIOs millions of dollars and a lot of time, lost time and heartache and headaches and all that stuff. What were some of your thoughts and takeaways from the conversation?
Yeah, I always love when Jonathan comes on. I feel like he makes a lot of great points and has a lot of great advice as well that he always gives the audience. I feel like the audience always asks really great questions as well. But a couple of follow-up questions from the conversation. I really found the part interesting when you guys were talking about senior hires as a negative multiplier within an organization. So why or how do poor senior decisions ripple into timelines, morale, vendor relationships, and future hires? Besides the fact that obviously they're hiring maybe potentially other people and those can trickle down. Is there any other factors as well that plays into that?
Yeah, if you have a situation where the person is not a good cultural fit, or they make a decision that's not aligned with what the business needs are, or if they come in with an unrealistic plan that doesn't really fit the situation of the organization, that alone can demoralize the team pretty significantly, because you lose a lot of trust, you lose a lot of the support that you need from the front lines, from the masses that are going to be supporting this project, and that are ultimately going to determine whether or not this project is successful and whether or not you're going to get the business value from it that you'd hope to get. So that's how these decisions can trickle down or create this domino effect of not only future bad hiring decisions, maybe poor technological decisions or technological decisions that don't fit the needs of the business. And if you have those things plus unrealistic timelines and decisions that just don't make sense for the organization, that absolutely affects the business outside of the decision itself that may not be ideal or may be flawed. It's also affecting the other people, because then they see that and they become demoralized, or they lose support or excitement for the project.
Absolutely. And going to the rush hiring and artificial urgency, how can CIOs distinguish between real urgency and vendor manufactured urgency when it comes to hiring?
Yeah, good question. I think I would go in, if I were a buyer of technology, I would go in with the assumption that any urgency that I feel is coming from the vendors, and it's probably manufactured. It reminds me right now what we're going through in the cloud space with a lot of companies still trying to make that move from on-premise to cloud applications. It reminds me a lot of Y2K, in the late 90s, when organizations were freaking out and scrambling to replace all their technology so that, when Y2K hit, it wasn't going to crash the computers. In hindsight, I was young at that time. I was just starting my career in the late 90s, right during that mad rush to upgrade. And I remember at the time thinking like, oh, wow, this is a big deal. Everyone has to replace their technology, because that's what I was told. I was told that by the consulting firm I worked for. And it's just what you heard in the industry is like, oh, everyone's, doing these massive upgrades and they need to do it now, because once Y2K hits, the computers might all crash and society's going to shut down. Well, you look back on it and it's like, well, there was not a single blip at Y2K. So was that ever really a risk, or was it just the vendors getting people in a state of panic? And and you look back on it now, and the whole premise of Y2K, or the flaw with old systems prior to Y2K, was that the old programming languages had two digit years. So like 1998 would just be 98 would be the code for that year. And people were worried that once it hit 2000, then 98 would go to 99 and then go to 00. And once it went to 00, all the computers would crash because they wouldn't understand, it wouldn't be able to transact stuff because now it's zeros. But now you look back and you're like, was that really ever a thing? I'm not a super technical person, so I don't know if it was. But the fact that not a single blip anywhere in the world that I can recall, nothing happened, that tells me that probably was a manufactured mad rush, because some people didn't upgrade and they were fine. They didn't have computers crashing. The lights didn't go out, the power didn't go out, airplanes didn't crash, all the stuff that people thought would happen. None of that happened. So it does make me wonder if that was all manufactured. But what we're experiencing right now is absolutely manufactured. and that you have to, you've got to move to the cloud now. We're going to sunset our old products. You've got technical debt. You're not future proof. You're using a lot of fear. The industry is using a lot of fear to drive technology and to create this false urgency. So I think to answer your question, as a buyer, you have to go in with the assumption that they are going to create a false sense of urgency, and it may not be urgent for you. It may be that your technology is so old and outdated and you've outgrown it that you should replace it, but you shouldn't be replacing it simply because your vendor tells you they're going to sunset their product, or they tell you that you're not future proof, or you've got technical debt. That's just all, FUD based, fear, uncertainty, and doubt based sales tactics. So that's what I would do if I were a buyer.
Yeah, that's a great point. And what a great conversation today between you and Jonathan, and some really great tips too.
Yeah. He's always got great advice, and his backstory is super interesting with the Hollywood casting background, which is unlike anyone else I know in the tech space. So he's got a very unique perspective there, which is very cool. Well, good. Well, we're going to continue on this thread of consulting and a little bit of career talk, I suppose, in this next session. But we're going to play you a YouTube clip of a video that I posted recently about what it's really like working with Big Four consulting firms. And this video was created both for people that are in consulting, in terms of managing your career, but also organizations that might be thinking about hiring or working with Big Four consulting firms. So I want to peel back the curtains a bit and share some of my experience, not only working for one of the Big Four consulting firms earlier in my career, but also just having worked with so many clients that are hiring and managing or struggling to manage Big Four consultants right now. So I'm going to play you this video clip, which will probably trigger some of you, and I apologize in advance for that, because if you are a proponent of Big Four consulting, you're probably going to be triggered by this video, because I'm not painting the most flattering picture of Big Four consulting, but I'm also not here just simply to bash them. So I want to be constructive in terms of what it means to you if you are going to work for or work with a Big Four consulting firm, just to be aware of some of these pitfalls. So we'll play the video and we'll come back and talk about it here in just a moment.
I certainly see the value in Big Four consulting firms, and I understand why a lot of organizations hire the Big Four consulting firms. For some organizations, they trust the name. Other organizations might be using those same firms as their auditors, so they feel a connection or a need to use that same firm for their digital transformations. Other firms may be mandated by their boards that they use a blue chip, well-known consulting firm. Whatever the reason may be why you work with a Big Four consulting firm may be very well justified. However, there's a dark side that most organizations aren't prepared for. And what I want to do today is share what those dark sides are of working with and hiring the Big Four consulting firms, not necessarily to change your mind and to convince you not to work with them, but just so you know going in what those risks are, so that you can manage the risk and manage the consultants rather than the consultants steamrolling and managing you. So that's what I want to do here today. And if you'd like to learn more about how to select and implement your system integrator, whether it's a Big Four consulting firm or any of the big system integrators out there, I encourage you to read our guide to selecting and managing your system integrator. You can find that by scanning the QR code right here, or you can go to the links below. The first thing to be aware of when working with the Big Four consulting firms is that they are in many cases wasting your money. Reason for that is because their job is to put as many bodies on your project as possible. Understandable enough, they're a consulting firm, they make money by billing by the hour. So of course, their economic self-interest is focused on making as much money as possible, as is every consulting firm, not just the Big Four consulting firms. The difference with Big Four consulting firms, though, is that the size and the magnitude and scale of the rate at which they burn through their client's budget and the client's money is unprecedented. It's big, massive numbers. So when you have these big, massive overruns involving a Big Four consulting firm, it's typically because of that, because of the big run rate and the large bloated projects that often come with it. Now, the thing to keep in mind, again, true for all consultants, not just the Big Four consulting firms, is that they are spending your money. So the work and the value they think they're providing, whether it adds value or not, is your money, yet oftentimes organizations don't have visibility into how that money is being spent, what value they are or aren't getting for it. And I'm going to come back to that point later today in terms of how you can better manage that. But those are the key points to keep in mind, is that when you're working with a Big Four consulting firm, they're spending a lot of money, and that money is yours. I mentioned how the Big Four consulting firms, and all consulting firms for that matter, have a vested interest to maximize their billable revenue and their billable hours. That's how they make their money. It's understandable. But the other issue here is twofold. One is that the Big Four consulting firms staff these projects with such size and scale that a smaller project isn't worth it to them. They won't typically touch a smaller project that doesn't involve dozens, if not hundreds, of resources on a project. So the size and scale of the economic misalignment is very large for some of these Big Four consulting firms. The other aspect to keep in mind is that the Big Four consulting firms typically have alignment with and loyalty to the software vendor or vendors that they are partnering with. So in many cases, they're receiving a cut of the subscription revenue that they're able to help sell, and their loyalties oftentimes conflict between the software vendor and the client. And so there are times where Big Four consultants are so myopically focused on their loyalty to the hand that feeds, which is in most cases the software vendor that they work with, that they can be blinded to what the client needs are. And in my opinion, if you're a client and you're hiring a Big Four consulting firm, they should be focused solely on your needs, and the alliance should be solely focused on you without having to worry about that conflict of interest between what your needs are from a business perspective and what the technological needs are from the vendor perspective. And those two things oftentimes come in conflict a lot more often than you think. So it's important to recognize that there is economic self-interest, as there is with any third party, and you just need to make sure you reconcile those and manage and mitigate those risks that go along with it. At the end of the day, the Big Four consulting firms are technologists. The technology they implement is what they focus on. It's probably why you hired them, because they're experts in certain technology or technologies, and their job is to design, build, and deploy technology. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to design, build, and deploy technology that works for your business and optimizes your business. You could have a consulting contract that has been adhered to 100%. They've delivered everything they said they would deliver. They did it on time. They did it on budget, although that rarely happens, but let's assume it does happen. And yet you could still end up with a dramatic failure on your hands, not because the technology doesn't work, but because it doesn't align with your business. Your people don't know how to use the software, and your operations come to a standstill, at which point, again, there's like economic self-interest here to where the Big Four consulting firm will actually benefit from the fact that you're harmed by this and having operational disruption, because you're going to keep them on board to try and fix the problem. So again, it's another perverse incentive where, whether they admit it or not, they actually benefit from you having trouble during your implementation, because the longer it takes, the more roadblocks you run into, the more they're going to benefit, because guess what? They make more money the longer the project takes and the more hours they sink into it. So it's important to recognize that their job is to deploy technology. Their job is not to ensure that your business benefits from the technology, even though they'll convince you that the technology itself will make you realize business value. But the technology itself is not going to be what delivers the business value. It's all the stuff that they typically don't do around change management, around process improvement, around architecture and integration to other third parties. All the other stuff that's typically outside the realm of what Big Four consulting firms are good at is typically what's going to make or break a digital transformation project. One thing that large organizations tend to forget is that they manage the system integrators. The system integrator, the Big Four consulting firm, does not manage the client. Yet, so many clients out there, so many organizations defer to a fault to the Big Four consulting firm. They defer to their expertise. They trust them, which is okay to a certain extent, but too many organizations take that too far and treat it as an open checkbook, as an open project plan, as just to have free reign over how the project is run. We recently worked with a large Fortune 500 organization based in the United States who agreed to let one of the Big Four consulting firms have ultimate decision-making authority over the project, which to me is absolutely unacceptable. That is not something that any organization should ever agree to, but this organization did. And this is a very sophisticated organization with very sophisticated procurement and legal counsel, and they still agreed to it. Now, the reason this is such a big deal is because it's not their project. Even though they're the experts, this is your business. They are one contractor. They're merely one piece of an overall transformation program. So there's no reason why you would want to defer the entire project to them and have them manage you. You should be managing them just like you would any other contractor, just like any other vendor, just like any other supplier. I can't think of a similar situation where an organization would bring on an outside vendor and just let that vendor handle whatever they wanted. Imagine building a building or a factory. You're not going to turn that over and hand it off completely to a third party without having pretty stringent controls and oversight in place. Yet, for a capital investment as big as a digital transformation, many organizations do exactly that. So just remember, you manage them, they don't manage you. And again, if you want to learn how to manage them better, be sure to download our guide to how to manage your system integrator. You can find that in the links below. Now, the biggest thing that the Big Four consulting firms don't want you to know is that you don't need them. Yes, they have the brand cachet. Yes, they have hundreds of thousands of employees throughout the world. Yes, they have a lot of experience with some of the biggest technologies in the world. Yes, they have some very smart people there. I'm proud of my background and experience having worked at one of these Big Four consulting firms, but at the end of the day, you don't need them. If they're not a good fit for you, if they're burning through your budget, if they're reckless with how they manage the project, if it just doesn't feel right, you may want to consider either replacing or at least augmenting them with other resources. Some examples or alternatives you might have is to go with a larger mid-tier vendor, especially if you yourself are a mid-size organization and you're working with one of the Big Four. It might be just overkill and too much complexity and too much overhead for an organization like you. You may decide to keep a core group of Big Four consultants for certain point areas of expertise and then bring in other contractors to help you with other pieces of the project. Now, Big Four consultants are really good at resisting this and convincing you that this is a bad idea because you'll have too many cooks in the kitchen or you need one point of accountability, whatever the case may be. But you don't want to listen to that because that is absolute garbage. That is turf protection, and that's a defensive move on their part. So if you need to bring in third-party resources, you should do so. If you need to bring in quality assurance or independent program management oversight, do that. And again, that should come from someone other than your Big Four consulting partner. And to be clear, and just as a disclaimer, that is a service that my company, Third Stage Consulting, provides, and that's a service we commonly provide to our clients that have hired and work with some of the Big Four consulting firms. And then the other option is you yourself can go to the open market and get independent contractors to manage different parts of your transformation. In fact, a lot of team members that work for these Big Four consulting firms are the same pools of contractors that we draw from when we're looking for technical contractors. And you yourself have access to those same people in many cases that the Big Four themselves would be deploying, except you don't have the middleman and you don't have all the politics and bureaucracy that goes with hiring them through the Big Four consulting firm. So just remember, you don't need them, and you certainly don't need to rely solely on them. It may be that they're a good fit for you, and if they are a good fit and it's working out for you, then great, stick with it. But if your gut is telling you that something's off, then I would go with that and maybe dig and explore into what your options may be. So, Darian, that was the video for my YouTube channel where I talk about what it's really like working with Big Four consulting firms. What were some of your thoughts, takeaways, questions, comments from that video?
For sure. Yeah. I think, first of all, I really liked the video, but the part I really liked about it was when you were talking about the truth they don't want you to realize is that you don't necessarily need them. I think that's something interesting that a lot of businesses out there don't really recognize. So us continuing to get that message out there, I think is super important. And I think with that, Eric, what are the first signs that a Big Four team is body stacking versus solving problems, and how can leadership measure or catch that early?
Well, I think the first place you have to look is what does the initial phase or the initial staffing of the project look like, the proposed staffing from the Big Four consulting firm. I think what you'll commonly see when you work with these firms and what we see our clients struggle with all the time is that the big consulting firm, they, first of all, it's all relative. So they have to, every project has to be a certain size. Like they're not going to mess around with a project where they're only going to put one or two people on it. That's not what the Big Four consulting model is. Their model is to put dozens, sometimes hundreds of people full-time on a project. So that's their going in mindset. And so if you start a project, and let's just say you just signed a contract with, let's just say SAP, and you decided you're going to go through an S/4HANA implementation. If the first order of business is for a big army of consultants to show up, in the next couple of weeks or right when the project starts off, that's a red flag, because what they do is they come in and they overwhelm you with numbers, just strength and numbers of people, and it gets really hard to control. And that run rate, that financial run rate becomes so out of control so quickly that you're just wasting money from day one. Because usually, if you have a team, let's say at its peak, you're going to have 50 people on the project. First of all, you have to ask, do I really need 50 people? But let's just say 50 people is the right number. It might be the right number at the peak when you're deep into design, testing, building, all that stuff. But do you need all 50 people to show up on day one? What are they going to do for the first 2 months of a project while you're still trying to figure out, who's going to be on your team internally, and you're still trying to map out, future state processes. You're trying to figure out what your overall strategy and plan is. Now they're telling you like, oh, don't worry about that. That's why we're bringing 50 people to show up tomorrow, because we're going to do that for you. Well, I would say, hold on, time out. Let's rationalize who we bring on and when we bring them on, because we don't need to blow our budget in the first 2 months when they're idle and not being productive. Now, the problem you have to recognize too is that there is an inherent conflict of interest, because the big SIs actually benefit from you overspending and taking too long and being inefficient with your use of consultants. That actually benefits them. So there's an inherent conflict of interest built into the model to begin with. So you just have to recognize that. I'm not saying that means you never hire them or that they're bad people or you shouldn't work with them, but it does mean you have to manage them. They want to manage you because they want to manage your budget and make sure that they can consume as much of your budget as possible, because that's in their self-interest. So you just have to recognize that tension and that misaligned goals that are set up from the start, and you just have to have a strong stomach and have the confidence to be able to manage through that.
For sure. And last question here. What is the fastest way to bring in an independent QA without starting a war during these projects?
Yeah, great question. And first of all, you have to ask yourself, why would that create a war? And that's the thing I'll ask our clients a lot. Like, why are you worried that this will create conflict? If we do a QA for a client and we identify challenges and risks and problems in the project that need to be mitigated in order for that client to be successful, why should that be a threat to anyone? And the fact that it might be a threat to someone, you have to wonder, well, why? Why is that? What is the motive that drives that? And the reason for that is because, oftentimes, especially the big four, and a lot of the bigger consulting firms are guilty of this as well, is that they're very territorial and they think that's their project. They are the experts. It's all about their technology that they're deploying, and all the money and focus should go to deploying that technology. And again, it's that inherent conflict of interest. The minute someone comes in with an objective quality assurance framework that calls out, hey, these things aren't being addressed, or maybe we need to focus less time on technology and focus more on change management or more on the overall PMO, you're taking control away from the SIs and you're putting it back with the customer, which in my opinion is where it belongs. But that is a threat to the big four consulting firms. And they're really good at navigating politically to keep independent and objective QA out of the picture, to where they end up being the fox guarding the hen house. Like, they will tell you if there's a problem, but spoiler alert, they're not going to tell you when there's problems. It's in their best interest to hide those problems, because they're very political. These big organizations are very political animals, and they will CYA. They'll cover their own asses to make sure that they don't get fired, or that they don't lose their gravy train or their cash cow of a project, which is your project and your budget. So that's the first thing. Ask yourself, why would this create a war, and what's the motive behind it potentially creating a war? But also, the way we approach these projects too is you can't be too combative and you can't be personal. So like, if Darian, if you were working for a big four and you were the project manager, I'm not going to come in here and say, Darian, you suck. And they need to fire you or whatever. It's not that. It's like, there are a number of issues in this project. Here are the risks. Here's what it means to the project. And here's how we recommend you address those. It's rarely going to be a situation where it's like, get rid of the big four, or get the PM out of here. Sometimes it is. I mean, sometimes you have incompetent people in these firms, in any firm you might hire. And that may be the case, but that's more of an exception. So I think the way you go about it, and having the right consulting partner, the right QA partner that can go in a non-threatening way, in a non-personal way, to be objective and just help you succeed. You just need someone that's their only job, their only purpose is to help you succeed. Then that shouldn't create a war. And if it does, you have to ask yourself, why is that?
Yeah, absolutely. What a great podcast episode today. I feel like we covered a lot of different topics.
Yes, we did. And hopefully we solved all the world's problems in a single episode here today. I don't think we did, but we tried. hopefully you got one step closer to at least. So good. Well, thank you for co-hosting again, as always, Darian. Thank you to the audience for the great questions. Thank you to Jonathan Whipple for being here. Again, if you'd like to learn more about Lander Talent, speaking of Jonathan, you'd like to learn more about him, we'll tag him below with the website. Go to landertalent.com if you want to learn more about how the Lander can help you staff your project and build out your team. And or if you're a candidate, if you want to be staffed on a project, reach out to him as well. It's landertalent.com. You can also follow him on LinkedIn as well. And of course, as always, you can reach out to me if you'd like to learn more about Third Stage or Lander, because I'm affiliated with both companies. But Third Stage Consulting is more of a traditional consulting firm that does independent tech agnostic consulting for digital transformations. You can reach out to me with my contact information below. But in the meantime, we'll have new episodes every Wednesday, same time, same place. Go to transformationgroundcontrol.com if you'd like to see past episodes. And I hope you have a great week in the meantime. And we'll see you next week on the next episode of Transformation Ground Control. Take care.